All right, here's another one that's been asked. Cosine, they tell you that alpha and beta are first quadrant angles. They give you the cosine of alpha and the sine of beta. Because they're in the first quadrant, I know that sine, cosine, tangent are all going to be positive. So in particular, there's a couple ways I can think of this, but uh, generally the way I do it is like this, that this is angle alpha in standard position. They tell me the cosine is 0.737. I always think of cosine as a fraction, so I think of that as divided by 1. So the hypotenuse is 1, and the 0.737 is the adjacent side, so adjacent divided by hypotenuse. I can then use the Pythagorean theorem here to get this other side as 1 squared minus 0.737 squared, and I type that into my calculator and I get 0.795. Um, Dave mentioned that he tried thinking of that as 737 divided by 1,000, which is okay. You'd be using 737 as this side and 1,000 as that side, and you probably would have calculated this other side as 795. That's a perfectly good way of doing this problem. Um, Similar thing over here for beta, but this time they tell me the sine. So if this is angle beta here, they tell me the sine, which is the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. Again, I'm thinking of the hypotenuse as 1, and this is a 0.45 over there. So I'm going to use my calculator and do 1 squared minus 0.45. Whoops, I didn't put squared there. I said squared, but I'm squaring that. Okay. And I get 0.893. That's an 8. Looks like a 0. 0.893. So now, to calculate these things, I can use my identities. Cosine of alpha plus beta is cosine alpha, cosine beta minus sine alpha, sine beta. And I can plug in the things I need. What's the cosine of alpha? Well, it's this divided by that, so 0.737. 0.737. What's the cosine of beta? Well, cosine of beta is over here. It's the 0.893. Right? What's the sine of alpha? 0.795. What's the sine of beta? Well, that's what they gave us is 0.45. Okay. So I'm going to multiply these two numbers together, multiply those two numbers, and subtract. Likewise down here for the sine of alpha, for beta minus alpha, this would be sine beta, sine alpha, no it isn't, cosine alpha minus cosine beta, sine alpha. Right, I'm going sine of the first, cosine of the second, cosine of the first, sine of the second, and the minus here is a minus there. And again, you're just going to look at these triangles now and plug in the appropriate four trig functions. You know, the sine of beta, 0.45, you know the cosine of alpha, 0.737, you know the cosine of beta, 0.85 to 893, and you know the sine of alpha is 0.795, so you can plug those in. So there you go.